The morning sun painted the sky in soft orange colors as Captain Marcus Williams walked through the employee parking lot at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. His black uniform was perfectly pressed, and his captain's hat sat straight on his head. At 38 years old, Marcus carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from years of flying planes and keeping people safe in the sky. Marcus had been flying for Skyline Airways for 15 years. In all that time, he had never been late for a flight, never had an accident, and never received a single complaint from passengers or crew members. His record was spotless, like a clean white sheet of paper with no marks on it. Other pilots respected Marcus deeply. When new pilots joined the airline, senior captains would tell them, "Watch how Captain Williams does things. Learn from him." Flight attendants loved working with Marcus because he was always calm, always professional, and always made sure everyone felt safe and comfortable. Marcus walked through the busy airport terminal, nodding hello to other airline employees he knew. The security guards waved at him as he passed through the crew entrance. Everyone knew Captain Williams. He was like a friendly neighborhood hero that everyone trusted and admired. That Tuesday morning was special for Marcus, but not because he was flying a plane. Instead, he was traveling as a passenger to Denver. This was called deadheading in the airline business. Sometimes pilots needed to travel to different cities to fly planes from there. The company would buy them tickets, and senior pilots like Marcus were allowed to sit in first class during these trips. Marcus had done this many times before. It was as normal as eating breakfast or brushing his teeth. He would sit in first class, review his flight plans for the next day, maybe read a book, or just relax. Other passengers rarely paid attention to him. To them, he was just another businessman, in a nice suit traveling for work. As Marcus approached Gate 23, he could see the big white airplane waiting outside the window. It was a Boeing 737, the same type of plane he flew almost every day. He knew every button, every switch, and every sound that plane could make. Flying these planes was like riding a bicycle for Marcus, easy and natural. The gate agent, a young woman named Sarah, smiled when she saw Marcus approaching. "Good morning, Captain Williams. Heading to Denver today?" "That's right," Marcus replied with his warm smile. "Got a flight to Los Angeles tomorrow morning from there." Sarah checked her computer and handed Marcus his boarding pass. "You're in Seat 2A today, first class. Have a great flight, Captain." Marcus thanked her and walked to the waiting area near the gate. He pulled out his tablet and began studying weather reports for his Los Angeles flight. Even when he wasn't working, Marcus was always preparing. Good pilots never stopped learning and planning. Around him, other passengers were waiting to board the plane. There were business people in suits, families with children going on vacation, and elderly couples visiting relatives. Everyone looked normal and relaxed. No one seemed worried or upset about anything. A few passengers recognized Marcus's uniform and captain's stripes. A nervous-looking woman approached him carefully. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "Are you the pilot for this flight?" Marcus looked up from his tablet and smiled kindly. "No, ma'am. I'm just traveling as a passenger today. But I am a pilot with Skyline Airways. Is there something I can help you with?" The woman looked relieved. "I'm just a little scared of flying. Seeing a real pilot here makes me feel better." "Flying is very safe," Marcus told her gently. "The pilots flying today are well-trained professionals just like all of us at Skyline. You'll be perfectly fine." The woman thanked him and returned to her seat, looking much more relaxed. This happened to Marcus often. People trusted him instantly. There was something about his calm voice and confident manner that made everyone feel safe. Marcus continued reading his weather reports when the boarding announcement began. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now boarding Flight 847 to Denver. We'll start with our first-class passengers and our Skyline Elite members." Marcus gathered his small carry-on bag and joined the short line of first-class passengers. The flight attendant at the door, Jessica, recognized him immediately. She had worked with Marcus on several flights before. "Captain Williams, nice to see you again," Jessica said warmly. "Are you working this flight?" "No, Just deadheading to Denver, Marcus replied. You're going to take good care of everyone today. I'm sure. Jessica laughed. We always do our best, Captain. Enjoy your flight. Marcus walked down the jet bridge and entered the airplane. The familiar smell of the cabin, a mix of cleaning products and recycled air, felt like home to him. He had spent thousands of hours in planes just like this one. The first-class cabin was small and comfortable, with only 12 seats arranged in 3 rows. Marcus found his seat, 2A, which was a window seat in the first row. He placed his bag in the overhead compartment and settled into the leather seat. As Marcus buckled his seatbelt, he looked around the cabin. A few other passengers were already seated. There was an older businessman reading a newspaper, a young woman talking quietly on her phone, and a couple sharing a magazine. Everyone seemed peaceful and happy to be starting their journey. Marcus pulled out his tablet again and continued reviewing his flight plans. Tomorrow's flight to Los Angeles would take him over mountains and deserts. He studied the weather patterns, looking for any signs of storms or rough air. Even though he had flown this route hundreds of times, Marcus always prepared carefully for each flight. The plane continued boarding as more passengers found their seats. Marcus could hear the sounds of families getting settled, flight attendants helping with luggage, and the general buzz of people preparing for travel. These were the normal, comfortable sounds of air travel. Flight attendant Jessica walked by his seat and smiled. Can I get you anything before takeoff, Captain? Coffee, juice, or water? Coffee would be great, thank you, Marcus replied. He always drank coffee before flights. It was part of his routine. As Jessica brought his coffee, Marcus felt completely relaxed and content. This was just another normal day in his life as a pilot. He was doing what he had done hundreds of times before, traveling to position himself for his next flight assignment. Everything was routine, comfortable, and exactly as it should be. Marcus had no idea that in just a few minutes, his peaceful morning would turn into a nightmare. He didn't know that his quiet, normal day was about to become the most challenging day of his entire career. And he certainly couldn't imagine that what happened next would shake Skyline Airways to its very foundation and change the airline industry forever. For now, Marcus simply sat in his assigned seat, sipped his coffee, and watched other passengers board the plane, completely unaware that his life was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. 20 minutes had passed since Marcus settled into his comfortable first-class seat. The airplane was filling up nicely and everything seemed perfectly normal. Passengers were finding their seats, putting bags in overhead bins, and getting ready for the flight to Denver. The friendly chatter of travelers mixed with the soft announcements from the flight crew. Marcus was still reading his weather reports on his tablet when he heard loud voices coming from the back of the plane. At first, he didn't pay much attention. Sometimes passengers had trouble finding their seats or fitting their bags in the overhead compartments. These small problems happened on every flight, but the voices were getting louder and more angry. Marcus looked up from his tablet and turned toward the sound. Other first-class passengers were also starting to notice the commotion. The peaceful atmosphere of the cabin was beginning to change. Suddenly, a woman's voice cut through all the other sounds like a sharp knife. "This is absolutely ridiculous," she shouted. "I demand to speak to someone in charge right now." Marcus saw a tall woman in an expensive-looking white dress walking quickly down the aisle toward first class. She had perfectly styled blonde hair and was carrying a designer handbag that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. Behind her, a younger woman in a black suit was following nervously, carrying several bags and trying to keep. The woman in the white dress stopped suddenly when she reached the first-class cabin. Her eyes moved from seat to seat, looking at each passenger carefully. When her gaze landed on Marcus, she froze completely. Her mouth opened slightly, and her face began to turn red with anger. "Excuse me," she said in a loud voice that everyone in first class could hear clearly. "I think there's been some kind of terrible mistake here." Marcus looked up from his tablet, confused by her aggressive tone. He had been minding his own business, not bothering anyone. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Is there a problem?" he asked politely. The woman's face grew even redder. She pointed directly at Marcus with her finger, like she was accusing him of stealing something. Yes, there certainly is a big problem. I specifically requested that my usual seat, 2A, be available for this flight. I fly this exact route every single month, and I always sit in that particular seat. She paused and looked Marcus up and down slowly, like she was examining a piece of furniture she didn't like. I don't understand why someone like you is sitting in my seat. The words hit Marcus like a punch in the stomach. He had heard that tone before in his life, and he knew exactly what the woman meant by someone like you. Even though he was wearing his pilot's uniform with captain's stripes clearly visible, even though he was obviously a professional airline employee, this woman was making assumptions about him based only on the color of his skin. Flight attendant. Jessica quickly walked over, sensing trouble. She had worked for airlines for 8 years and could recognize a difficult situation developing. Ma'am, I can certainly check the seating arrangements for you, but Captain Williams is deadheading to Denver for his next flight assignment and— Captain? The woman interrupted with a harsh, mean laugh that made several passengers turn around in their seats. Look, I don't know what kind of game you people are playing here, but I know who belongs in first class and who doesn't. This whole situation is completely ridiculous. Other passengers throughout the cabin were now staring at the scene unfolding in first class. Some people pulled out their phones, sensing that something important was happening. Others looked uncomfortable and embarrassed by what they were witnessing. The normal, peaceful atmosphere of the flight had completely disappeared. Marcus felt his heart beating faster, but he kept his voice calm and professional. This was not the first time in his life that someone had judged him by his skin color instead of his character or qualifications. Ma'am, I am Captain Marcus Williams with Skyline Airways, he said clearly, reaching into his jacket pocket. Here is my identification and my employee badge. He held out his official airline ID card, which had his photo, his captain's rank, and his employee number clearly displayed. Any reasonable person could see that he was exactly who he claimed to be. But the woman barely glanced at his identification. She waved her hand dismissively as if his official documents meant nothing to her. I don't care what those fake papers say. Anyone can get documents printed these days. I want to speak to someone in real authority immediately. This situation is absolutely unacceptable. The woman's assistant, who had been standing quietly behind her, looked extremely embarrassed. She whispered something in the woman's ear, probably trying to calm her down, but the woman pushed her away angrily. Don't you dare tell me to be quiet, Amanda, the woman snapped at her assistant. I pay your salary, and I pay this airline thousands and thousands of dollars every year. I will not be treated like some common person who doesn't matter. Jessica, the flight attendant, was trying her best to handle the situation professionally. Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but I need to ask you to lower your voice. Other passengers are trying to— Other passengers? The woman interrupted again, her voice getting even louder. What about me? I'm Patricia Blackwood. Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea how much money I spend with this airline every single year? Marcus had never heard of Patricia Blackwood, but from the way she was acting, she clearly expected everyone to know her name and treat her like royalty. She continued her angry speech, telling everyone within hearing distance about her importance and her frequent travel with the airline. I fly with Skyline Airways every month, she declared, waving her arms dramatically. I spend over $50,000 a year on tickets. I attend charity galas, business meetings, and social events all across the country. I am not some nobody who can be ignored or pushed around. She pointed at Marcus again, her finger shaking with anger. I specifically booked seat 2A for this flight, just like I always do. My assistant Amanda called the airline 3 days ago to confirm my reservation. And now I find some random person sitting in my seat, pretending to be a pilot. The word pretending hit Marcus harder than anything else she had said. In his 15 years as a professional pilot, no one had ever questioned his qualifications or suggested that he was lying about his job. He had worked incredibly hard to earn his captain's stripes, and he had proven himself over and over again through years of safe professional flying. More passengers were now watching the confrontation. Some looked shocked by Patricia Blackwood's behavior, while others seemed uncomfortable and looked away. The boarding process had completely stopped as everyone focused on the drama unfolding in first class. Marcus realized that this situation was spiraling out of control quickly, and he had no idea how much worse it was about to become. The situation in first class was getting worse by the minute. Patricia Blackwood's voice was so loud that passengers sitting in the middle and back of the plane were turning around to see what was happening. Children were asking their parents about the angry woman, and business travelers were putting down their phones and newspapers to watch the drama unfold. Flight attendant Jessica was trying everything she could think of to calm Patricia down. "Ma'am, please, I understand you're frustrated, but I need you to speak more quietly. We have other passengers who—" "I don't care about other passengers," Patricia shouted, cutting Jessica off mid-sentence. "I care about getting what I paid for. I specifically booked this seat and I want this person removed from my airplane immediately." She pointed at Marcus again, her finger shaking with rage. Marcus sat quietly in his seat, still holding his official airline identification. He could feel the eyes of dozens of passengers staring at him. Some looked sympathetic, understanding that he was being treated unfairly. Others looked confused, not sure what to believe. Patricia's assistant, Amanda, looked like she wanted to disappear. She kept tugging on Patricia's arm, trying to get her to lower her voice, but Patricia pushed her away every time. "Stop touching me, Amanda. I am handling this situation myself." The commotion was so disruptive that other passengers were starting to complain. A businessman in seat 3C called out, "Can we please get this flight moving? Some of us have important meetings in Denver." An elderly woman in seat 4A added, "This is very uncomfortable for everyone. Can't someone fix this problem?" Patricia spun around to face the other passengers. "This problem will be fixed as soon as they remove this imposter from my seat," she declared loudly. The word imposter made Marcus's chest tighten with anger and hurt. He had spent 15 years building his reputation as a professional pilot. He had saved lives, kept passengers safe through storms and emergencies, and earned the respect of everyone he worked with. But this woman was calling him a fake in front of a plane full of people. Jessica realized she needed help handling Patricia. She pressed the call button to contact the cockpit. Within moments, Captain Rodriguez appeared from the front of the plane. Marcus knew Rodriguez well. They had flown together many times over the years and had always gotten along perfectly. "Captain," Rodriguez looked tired and stressed as he approached the first-class cabin. He could see that Patricia was extremely upset, and he knew that angry passengers could cause serious delays or even cancel flights. Airlines always tried to keep their customers happy, especially the ones who paid for expensive first-class tickets. "Good morning, ma'am," Rodriguez said to Patricia in his most professional voice. "I'm Captain Rodriguez, and I'll be flying this aircraft today. I understand there's some confusion about seating." Patricia's whole attitude changed when she saw Rodriguez. Because he was Hispanic, she seemed to view him as more acceptable than Marcus. Her voice became slightly less harsh, though she was still clearly angry. "Finally, someone in real authority," she said. "Captain, I am Patricia Blackwood, and I fly with this airline every single month. I always book seat 2A, and I confirmed my reservation 3 days ago. But when I boarded today, I found this person sitting in my seat claiming to be a pilot." Rodriguez looked at Marcus with confusion and concern. He knew Marcus was a real captain. They had worked together for years. But he also knew that Patricia was making a very public scene, and the airline's policy was always to try to make upset customers happy. "Ma'am, Captain Williams is indeed one of our senior pilots," Rodriguez explained carefully. "He's deadheading to Denver for his next assignment." Patricia's face turned red again. "I don't care what story you're telling me. I want my seat and I want it now. If this problem isn't solved immediately, I'm getting off this plane and calling my lawyer. I'll also be calling the airline's corporate headquarters to file a formal complaint." The threat of legal action and corporate complaints made Rodriguez very nervous. Airlines were always afraid of bad publicity and expensive lawsuits. Patricia clearly knew how to use the system to get what she wanted. A gate agent was called onto the plane, followed by a supervisor named Mr. Thompson. Thompson was a middle-aged man who had worked for the airline for 20 years. He had dealt with difficult passengers before, but nothing quite like this situation. Patricia repeated her demands to Mr. Thompson, this time adding even more threats. I spend over $50,000 a year with this airline, she told him. I have friends who are major shareholders in Skyline Airways. If this situation isn't resolved to my satisfaction, I will make sure that everyone knows how terribly your airline treats its premium customers. She also mentioned that she was flying to Denver for a charity gala where she would be sitting with the mayor, 2 congressmen, and several wealthy business leaders. Do you really want me telling all of those important people about the terrible service I received on Skyline Airways? She asked. Mr. Thompson looked around the cabin nervously. The boarding process had been stopped for almost 30 minutes. Other passengers were getting restless and angry about the delay. Some were checking their watches and complaining about missing connecting flights or important meetings. The pressure was enormous. On one side, Thompson had Patricia Blackwood making threats about lawsuits, bad publicity, and corporate complaints. On the other side, he had Captain Marcus Williams, a respected employee who was just trying to do his job. But Thompson was thinking like a businessman, not like someone who cared about right and wrong. He saw Patricia as a customer who spent a lot of money with the airline. He saw her threats as real dangers to the company's reputation and profits. The fact that Marcus was being treated unfairly seemed less important than avoiding a public relations disaster. Thompson walked over to Marcus and spoke in a quiet voice, hoping other passengers wouldn't hear. Captain Williams, I know this is an unusual situation, but would you consider moving to a different seat? We have another first-class seat available in row 4B. It's still first class, just a few rows back. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. After 15 years of perfect service to the airline, after proving himself over and over again, he was being asked to give up his assigned seat to satisfy a racist passenger's demands. The entire first-class cabin went silent. Everyone was waiting to see what Marcus would do. Some passengers looked shocked that the airline would even consider such a request. Others looked away, too embarrassed to watch what was happening. Marcus felt like the whole world was watching him, waiting to see if he would stand up for himself or give in to discrimination. The decision he made in the next few moments would change everything. The entire first-class cabin was silent. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what Captain Marcus Williams would do. The supervisor's request hung in the air like a dark cloud. Move to a different seat to make the racist passenger happy, or stand up for what was right. Marcus sat perfectly still for what felt like forever, but was really only about 30 seconds. His mind was racing, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 15 years of perfect service, thousands of hours of safe flying, awards for excellence, respect from colleagues and passengers, and now this. He looked around the cabin and saw different expressions on people's faces. Some passengers looked angry about what was happening to him. A young woman in seat 3B was shaking her head in disgust. An older businessman was recording the scene with his phone, clearly upset by the airline's behavior. But other passengers looked uncomfortable and were avoiding eye contact. They knew what was happening was wrong, but they didn't want to get involved. They just wanted the problem to go away so the flight could take off on time. Patricia Blackwood stood with her arms crossed, a satisfied smile on her face. She thought she had won. In her mind, she had proven that money and threats could get her anything she wanted. She was already imagining herself sitting in seat 2A, enjoying her victory over what she saw as an inferior person. Marcus slowly closed his tablet and put it in his bag. The small action seemed to make everyone in the cabin more nervous. What was he going to do? Then Marcus did something that surprised everyone. Instead of arguing or getting angry, he stood up calmly and began gathering his belongings from the overhead compartment. His movements were slow and deliberate, like he was thinking carefully about each action. "Captain Williams, where are you going?" Jessica, the flight attendant, asked. Her voice was full of concern. She had worked with Marcus before and knew he was a good man who didn't deserve this treatment. Marcus looked at her with sad but determined eyes. "I'm getting off this flight," he said in a voice that was quiet, but strong enough for everyone to hear. The supervisor, Mr. Thompson's face went white with panic. "Captain, please, let's not make this situation bigger than it needs to be. We can work this out, just move to the other seat and everything will be fine." Marcus turned to face Thompson directly. When he spoke, his voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath the quiet words. Sir, you just asked a senior captain with 15 years of perfect service to give up his assigned seat to accommodate racial prejudice. This isn't a customer service issue. This is discrimination, and I will not be part of normalizing it. Several passengers gasped at Marcus's direct words. He had said out loud what everyone was thinking but afraid to say. This wasn't about seat, assignments, or customer service. This was about racism, pure and simple. Patricia's smile disappeared. How dare you call me racist, she shouted. I simply wanted my reserved seat. This has nothing to do with race. Marcus looked at her calmly. Ma'am, you refused to look at my official identification. You called me an imposter and a fake. You said I didn't belong in first class. What exactly was that based on, if not my race? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Patricia opened her mouth to answer, but no words came out. Everyone in the cabin knew exactly what her behavior had been based on, and her silence proved Marcus's point. As Marcus walked toward the exit door, he pulled out his phone. The first call he made was to his union representative. This is Captain Marcus Williams, employee ID 77409. I need to report a discrimination incident at Gate 23, Chicago O'Hare. The supervisor tried to follow him. Captain Williams, please don't make any hasty decisions. Let's talk about this privately. But Marcus was already making his second phone call, this time to his personal lawyer. Jim, it's Marcus. I need you to meet me at O'Hare immediately. We have a serious situation. Passengers throughout the plane were now pulling out their phones. Some were taking pictures and videos of what was happening. Others were posting on social media about the shocking scene they had just witnessed. The story was already beginning to spread beyond the airplane. Marcus made his third phone call as he walked up the jet bridge. This call would change everything, though nobody on the plane knew it yet. The person who answered was Dr. Sarah Chen, the Vice President of Operations at Skyline Airways. Dr. Chen, this is Captain Williams. I need to inform you that I am withdrawing from Project Skybridge, effective immediately. There was silence on the other end of the phone for several seconds. Marcus, what are you talking about? Project Skybridge. Launches in 2 weeks. You're the lead consultant. I was just discriminated against by Skyline Airways personnel at Gate 23. I was asked to give up my assigned seat to accommodate a passenger's racist demands. Under these circumstances, I cannot continue my involvement with the project. Doctor. Chen's voice became urgent. Marcus, don't do anything until I can talk to you. Where are you going? I'm going home, Dr. Chen. My lawyers will be in contact with the company. Marcus ended the call and continued walking through the terminal. Behind him, chaos was erupting on Flight 847. Passengers were demanding to know what had just happened. Some were asking to get off the plane in protest. Others were calling friends and family to tell them about the incredible scene they had just witnessed. Captain Rodriguez came out of the cockpit, looking confused and upset. He had known Marcus for years and couldn't believe his airline had treated him this way. What just happened here? He asked Thompson angrily. Thompson was sweating and nervous, realizing that the situation had spiraled completely out of control. The passenger was very upset, and we were just trying to resolve the issue. By discriminating against one of our best pilots? Rodriguez shot back. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Patricia Blackwood finally got her seat 2A, but her victory felt hollow. Other passengers were staring at her with disgust and anger. Some were openly calling her racist. Her assistant Amanda looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. A young man in seat 4C stood up and addressed Patricia directly. Lady, you should be ashamed of yourself. That man served this country and this airline with honor, and you treated him like garbage. An elderly woman added, I've never seen anything so disgraceful in my life. You should apologize. But Patricia just sat down and tried to ignore the criticism from other passengers. She had gotten what she wanted, but it was becoming clear that her victory would cost her much more than she had expected. Meanwhile, Marcus was already in a taxi heading home, making phone calls that would soon shake Skyline Airways to its very foundation. What the airline didn't know yet was that Captain Marcus Williams wasn't just any pilot. He held the key to their most important project, and by discriminating against him, they had just triggered a crisis that would cost them everything. Within 2 hours of Marcus leaving the airplane, the story exploded across the internet like wildfire. Videos taken by passengers were being shared on every social media platform. The hashtag #CaptainWilliams was trending on Twitter, and major news websites were picking up the story. The videos showed everything clearly. Patricia Blackwood's racist behavior, the airline employees asking Marcus to move, and Marcus's dignified response as he walked off the plane. Millions of people were watching, and most of them were furious at how Skyline Airways had treated their own pilot. But the real earthquake hit Skyline Airways' corporate headquarters when Marcus's lawyer called the company's legal department. The lawyer's message was simple but devastating. Captain Marcus Williams is immediately suspending his involvement in Project Skybridge due to discriminatory treatment he received from airline personnel. All contracts related to his consulting services are now under review. The legal department secretary who took the call didn't understand why this was such a big problem. She wrote down the message and passed it along to her supervisor, who also didn't realize the significance. The message slowly worked its way up the corporate chain until it reached someone who understood exactly what it meant. When the news finally reached CEO Margaret Foster, she was in a board meeting discussing quarterly profits. Her assistant knocked on the conference room door and whispered urgently in her ear. Margaret's face went white as she listened to the message. "Excuse me," she told the board members, her voice shaking slightly. "I need to step out for an emergency call." Margaret rushed to her office and immediately called Dr. Sarah Chen, the vice president of operations. "Sarah, please tell me the Marcus Williams situation isn't as bad as it sounds." Dr. Chen's voice was grim. "It's worse, Margaret. Much worse. Marcus just called me from his lawyer's office. He's not only pulling out of Project Skybridge, he's considering a federal discrimination lawsuit against the company." Margaret felt like the floor was falling out from under her feet. She had worked with Marcus personally for months on Project Skybridge. She knew him as a brilliant, professional, and respected pilot. The thought that her own airline had discriminated against him made her feel sick to her stomach. Project Skybridge wasn't just any ordinary company initiative. It was a revolutionary $120 million program to modernize airline training and safety protocols. The project had taken 3 years to develop and involved partnerships with federal aviation authorities, major aircraft manufacturers, and international safety organizations. Marcus wasn't just a consultant on the project, he was the heart and soul of the entire program. His expertise, reputation, and relationships with aviation professionals around the world were essential to every aspect of Skybridge. Without Marcus, the project would collapse completely. The financial implications hit Margaret like a tsunami wave. Project Skybridge had binding contracts with government agencies that couldn't be broken without massive penalties. International partners had already invested millions of dollars based on Marcus's involvement. Aircraft manufacturers had designed new training systems specifically around Marcus's recommendations. Margaret called an emergency meeting with her top executives. Within 1 hour, the conference room was filled with panicked company leaders trying to understand how a simple seating dispute had become a corporate catastrophe. "How much money are we talking about?" asked the chief financial officer. Dr. Chen pulled up the numbers on her laptop. Direct losses from canceling Project Skybridge would be approximately $120 million. But that's just the beginning. We also face potential lawsuits from international partners, contract penalties with government agencies, and the complete loss of our competitive advantage in pilot training. The chief legal officer looked even more worried. "If Captain Williams files a federal discrimination lawsuit, we're looking at additional millions in legal fees, settlement costs, and punitive damages. Plus, the publicity would be devastating for our brand." Margaret's phone was ringing constantly with calls from reporters, investors, and company board members who had seen the viral videos. Skyline Airways' stock price had already dropped 15% in just 2 hours of trading. The situation got worse when major corporate clients started calling. 3 large companies that used Skyline Airways for business travel demanded explanations for the incident. 2 of them threatened to cancel their $1 million contracts if the situation wasn't resolved immediately. Margaret made a decision that would have seemed impossible just that morning. She canceled all her meetings for the rest of the week and booked an emergency flight to Chicago. She was going to personally apologize to Marcus and try to save her company from complete disaster. By the time Margaret's plane landed in Chicago, the story had spread even further. News trucks were parked outside Marcus's house. Civil rights organizations were calling for boycotts of Skyline Airways. The NADLACP had issued a statement demanding a federal investigation into the airline's practices. Marcus was at his lawyer's office, calmly reviewing his options when Margaret called requesting an emergency meeting. His lawyer, Jim Patterson, advised him that he held all the cards in this situation. "Marcus, you can basically name your terms. They need you much more than you need them." The meeting took place in a downtown Chicago conference room. Margaret brought her top executives, legal team, and public relations specialists. Marcus brought only his lawyer and his union representative. Margaret's first words were a sincere, heartfelt apology. "Captain Williams, I am deeply sorry for what happened to you today. What you experienced was completely unacceptable and goes against everything our company claims to stand for." She offered Marcus a comprehensive settlement package, full public apology, immediate policy changes throughout the airline, mandatory anti-discrimination training for all employees, a substantial financial settlement, and his choice of any position within the company. But Marcus's response surprised everyone in the room. "Mrs. Foster, this was never about money for me. This is about making sure that no other employee, pilot, flight attendant, or ground crew member ever experiences what I went through today." Marcus had conditions that went beyond personal compensation. He wanted Skyline Airways to become a leader in workplace equality. He demanded the creation of a diversity and inclusion department with real power to investigate complaints. He insisted on anonymous reporting systems for discrimination incidents and regular audits of company practices. Most importantly, Marcus wanted Patricia Blackwood permanently banned from flying with Skyline Airways. "If you're serious about change," he told Margaret, "you need to show that discriminatory behavior has real consequences for customers, not just employees." The negotiations lasted 2 days. In the end, Marcus agreed to return to Project Skybridge, but only after Skyline Airways implemented sweeping changes that would transform the entire airline industry's approach to discrimination. The incident became a landmark case studied in business schools and civil rights courses. Patricia Blackwood faced her own consequences. She was banned from multiple airlines and became a symbol of entitled racism that cost companies millions. Captain Marcus Williams returned to the skies as a hero who had stood up for dignity and equality. His quiet courage in that first-class cabin had changed an entire industry and proven that sometimes one person's refusal to accept injustice can move mountains.